Hello, so today we're going to do a little bit of a fun video for this beautiful August afternoon. Today we're going to do a tier list on all the units in set 12. We're basically going to go through them, and these tier lists are going to be per cost, the same way that I did at the beginning of set 11. Right now it's a little bit awkward. We're going to be like, obviously everybody knows SYNDRA is busted. And she's going to be Giga S tier. We're going to think about this like outside the realm of SYNDRA in particular. And I'll talk about it more when we talk about the 2 costs. But first, I just wanted to say thank you for all the support. So this is like a view of my YouTube. If you didn't know, I've been doing daily uploads. And guess what? If we go by date, it's August 7th. We made it to a whole year. We did a year straight of daily uploads. I made a bunch of videos with less than 10 views for like the first couple months, and then eventually we popped off and I got a lot of support. So thank you everybody who subscribed. If you watch my videos or you click on my videos, even if it's just for a second, subscribing helps me out a lot, especially as a small YouTuber. So make sure to like and subscribe these videos if they actually help you, or if you even learn something or find them at least a little bit entertaining. I'm hoping to do some more guides. I just haven't been feeling well as the fact that like the set feels like a lot of people are kind of upset with the balance, so it's going to be really hard for me to say like this is a how to play guide and it's just going to be like you gotta play SYNDRA on your board. It's going to be like I'm waiting for probably the next patch, and then I'm going to pump out a bunch of guides on 4 cost, 1 cost, 3 cost, when there's a little bit more variety in the comps, or at least when it feels more stable in the variety of the comps. Alright, now we're going to start with the tier list. So I did the little intro. For the tier lists, we'll talk about some of the other stuff. We'll talk about SYNDRA when we get to SYNDRA, obviously. But let's just go through the tier list. I'm going to order them by tier of 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 cost, because it's hard to like rank everybody relative to each other. So I'm going to talk about them in terms of how much they cost, how much they do per their cost, and basically if I think that they're a good unit based on that. Right? Whenever you think about 1 cost, for example, this will be the 1 cost tier list. 1 cost have to accomplish the job of like stage 2, stage 3. Right, a lot of times you're swapping out your 1 cost late game. You don't expect the 1 cost to be like super duper strong into the end of the game. Sometimes there's specific 1 cost reroll comps that are very strong, which we'll talk about as well. But that's not like the purpose of a 1 cost all the time. The purpose of the 1 cost is like, is this unit strong for its price, and then does it serve its purpose as being like an item holder, for example, into the middle to late game to end game. So let's just start with it. Ashe I think is like the solid average unit. I think she's like a solid B tier. I feel like whether you're playing Eldritch, whether you're playing multi-striker, whatever you're playing, Ashe is usually the first one that you want to drop. At the same time, she helps with the synergies that she has a lot. She also pumps out a lot of damage in certain situations. Obviously, if you give her like the Runan's augment, right, where it gives you a Runan's and makes the Runan's fire and do more damage, then she does pump out damage. She falls off towards the late game really hard, and there is some potential for her to like be something more than she already is, but I think she serves her purpose perfectly fine. She's the most solid of tiers, and she's like a very solid 1 cost. I think that she can win you a lot of fights, and she can item hold really well, and she can get you through stage 2 and 3 pretty easily. Obviously, if you have a multi-striker opening, the whole multi-striker board is really strong, but it's never by nature of the Ashe being the main carry, if that makes sense. You're never itemizing the Ashe when you're playing multi-strikers. Blitzcrank, this just goes as a larger sentiment. There's 3 defensive traits this set. There's always 3. One that does like damage reduction, one that does HP scaling, and one that does armor and MR. The one that Blitzcrank is a part of, which is like damage reduction typically, or whatever you'd fall into that category of defensive trait, is Vanguard. Vanguard is by far the strongest of the defensive traits right now. I don't think Blitzcrank in particular is a really broken unit, but Blitzcrank accomplishes the job really well of being a very strong Vanguard unit, and fits in very nicely for synergies on a lot of boards. You see him on Kog'Maw boards all the time. You'll see him on Vigor boards if you play like Vigor reroll Mage. You'll see them on like general Vanguard boards if you still didn't hit like one of the higher cost units, because of the other Vanguard units he's probably the most tanky. So really strong, really good item holder. Fits in a lot of late game boards for the synergies as well. Accomplishes really well as a 1 cost tank, and there's also a hero augment, which if you have a good spot for is also really good to play with Blitzcrank. So Blitzcrank, solid A tier. Definitely like good unit, right? Elise kind of falls in the same spot. I don't know where to put Elise, if I put her B or A. I personally really have faith in Elise because I think Elise, with some good items, just absolutely shreds and does so much damage. She is really, really, really strong and really, really also, I say shreds like I mean like a paper shredder. I know shred's a term in League and TFT. Let's disregard that. But she does a lot, right? She has a stun, right? She has a stun, which stuns are usually really good, especially into like melee comps and like certain cheesy comps. Stuns are always huge. I feel like 3-star Elise is also extremely tanky. The problem is Shapeshifter isn't that good of a frontline trait, in my opinion. I feel like early game Bastions are really strong until people have like shredding and all of that, shredding and armor reduction, all of that stuff set up. But until like early game, like, you know, if you have an Elise 2, she's really hard to kill, right? I made the joke like a while ago when I was talking about like Elise Hero Augment that she was part cockroach because of how hard she was to kill. Maybe that's a bit of exaggeration. She's not that difficult to kill, but I think in certain setups she is very, very, very strong. As well as the synergy with Eldritch, a lot of times because just by nature of Syndra being broken, Eldritch is seeing a lot of play. Eldritch itself is really broken in certain situations, like School Mascot is like a guaranteed top 4. You don't even need Syndra 3. It's like it's absolutely busted. So she gets a lot of play, and for that she's like the same tier as Blitzcrank, even though defensively she doesn't have as good of a synergy. I think she is harder to kill than a Blitzcrank on a board, don't get me wrong, but that's like the explanation. Jax is busted. I think Jax is Giga S tier, probably the only S tier. Jax doesn't have a defensive trait, but if you read his ability, Jax does so much, right? Jax is a really good item holder for all tank items, right? You basically build Jax like a tank. He does bonus damage based on his tank stats, and like, you know, if you're playing him with multi-strikers, Jax 3 goes nuts. I've played multi-striker games where I put Jax with like Gargoyle, Spark, and no lie, Jax does like more damage than Kassadin. Or as much damage as Kassadin in some cases. It's an actual insane amount of damage that Jax can pump out while still being really tanky because you give him all defensive items, right? I think out of all the 1-cost units, you can also see him very often late game because of the multi-striker Chronos synergy. Even if you're not playing like dedicated multi-striker, playing around Camille, if you have like a very high roll position, it's really nice to have a Jax or a Jax 3 on your board. It works out nice with the synergies, right? I think that by and far Jax is the strongest 1-cost. Let's go through the next one. Jace is like, I don't know, Jace pumps out damage, but I feel like Jace is like one of the first units to drop. I put Jace at B tier. Jace is like a backline unit that then jumps in and becomes a frontline unit. Jace pumps out damage, right? He does a lot. Like TG Jace is like up here, right? Like somewhere here, if you just have him for fun. But realistically, I feel like you don't want to build towards Jace as often as you would some of the other units. So I put him probably in the same tier as Ashe, like that level of usefulness. Lilia, probably like, I don't know, C tier. I think Lilia is strong in certain situations. Same like Poppy. I think Poppy is like B tier. I like Poppy a little bit more than Lilia, but maybe it's like swapped. They're like around the same. Let's just put them both in like B tier because they're Bastions, right? B for Bastions. Bastion's a good trait. It's really good early game. Having them upgrade is really nice. We'll just rank Zoe at the same time. I think Zoe's like A tier. I think Zoe's either A tier or S tier. I'll just put it at the top of A tier, right? Zoe reroll is really strong, but Zoe reroll is really dependent on you hitting everything and then making it to like Rise and Taric, right? If you look at stats as well, it kind of supports that idea that like Zoe reroll averages like a 5 or like a 4.5 to a 5, but then if you put in Rise and Taric, it averages like a 3. It's really broken if you can make it to like the 4 Scholar, 4 Bastion variation, because then Zoe just like absolutely stabilizes and shreds everybody and like destroys the whole board. But Zoe really struggles, I think, in terms of like you need proper items, and then you also need to like hit all the Zoes, and you really need to like have a 3-star front line to stabilize around the Zoe because she attacks kind of slow and you don't really want to build attack speed. She also really wants a blue buff and a Nashor's and a Rabadon's. Like her items are a little bit narrow. Maybe it will change in a little bit. It'll be more she'll be more well-rounded, and then maybe she'll be like Giga S tier. But I think like if we're talking about like in all situations, you never really play Zoe unless you're going Zoe reroll. But Jax, I think you can just play as an opener pretty often, and it can carry you a lot of the game, or it can carry you a lot into stage 3. Namzi's probably like B tier. It's either B tier or A tier. Namzi pumps out damage. I'm pretty happy when I item hold towards Namzi. Seraphine's like D tier. This unit fucking sucks. I think Seraphine reroll, I think there's sometimes success, especially if you have Mage, but you wouldn't ever roll for a Seraphine. I feel like even early game, sometimes she does damage. She does this thing where she shoots through multiple enemies, similar to like Lux of last set. But it's just like, I don't know, like Seraphine 3 kind of pops off. Seraphine 2 sometimes pops off with a Fairy Crown. But like, I'd rather just play like a Tristana with a Fairy Crown. You know what I mean? I wouldn't invest gold into making Seraphine, because it's really hard to make the synergies fit in. Then if you try and fit in Mage, you're not really playing Fairy anymore. And then if you're playing Fairy, you're not really playing Mage. So like early game, she's kind of okay. But I feel like even on stage 3, very rarely, like maybe D's a little bit mean because of Soraka. I think Soraka is closer to D tier. Like if we're talking about them as a unit, Soraka has shape as what's it called, Sugarcraft, but I don't think it's that strong. I think it's a little bit better just to play around Soraka. Sorry, I think it's a little bit better to play around Seraphine, so we'll see. Ziggs is in like same tier as Seraphine. Really doesn't do that much. With Honeymancy, maybe it's a little bit better. Honestly, maybe I should just put them all together. Warwick's somewhere here. Warwick's a Vanguard, so he sees a lot of play, but I don't know. Warwick is depressing. I wanted Warwick to be good, because Warwick, if you read him, he has like an infinite scaling, right? He's supposed to like gain attack speed permanently, and there's supposed to be like this Warwick reroll line. It's very specific now, even with like the best case scenario. I feel like you never play around Warwick. Even if you have like the option of like Corrupt Vampiric Scepter and you have like the perfect Warwick opener, I feel like this unit still is going to go bot 4. It's so hard to play around. Part of it is because SYNDRA's busted, which we'll talk about in a second. But I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily put him at like anywhere higher than B, just because of by nature of characteristics. And then Twitch is like C tier. I think Twitch like always disappoints me. It's kind of sucks. Twitch is like weird. Honestly, maybe I put like, maybe I just do this. This is probably a little bit better. No D tier. I don't think there's any one cost that's like atrocious. Maybe Seraphine. I don't know if this is too mean. I feel like there's a distinction between these B tier units and these units. But anyways, I digress. Twitch, the only reason Twitch makes it to B tier is because Twitch has mid-game ramifications. There's reasons to play Twitch mid-game as like a +1 unit, and that's because Twitch sunders units. Twitch is the only unit in the game that can naturally reduce armor. So there's one in this set. There's only one unit that can reduce armor. There's only one unit that can reduce magic resist. So Twitch works as a utility user. You never really want to play Twitch as like a main carry, or like a main focus of like this guy's gonna do a bunch of damage, because he just doesn't. I think Frost units in general are like in this weird spot where like I think they were really busted in PvE, and then the trait and the units themselves got nerfed to a point now where they're not busted, because they used to be like, you know, you would just play Vertical Frost in PvE and you'd win every single game because you got so much stats from the Frost, giving them AD and AP, and then in addition you had like a lot of interwoven synergies within the units themselves, like the Hunter with the Twitch and the Olaf. But you know, now they're kind of not much to write home about. I would put them around B tier, just because by nature of like Twitch should be like here or here, but because he sunders, he's up here, because he as a +1 in some of those boards, you can keep him into your game and then not have to make, or sorry, until you make like a Last Whisper or an Even Shroud, and then you can drop the Twitch. But he has like utility, whereas like these units don't. For example, a lot of times it's just like, okay, I can finally get rid of them, right? Anyways, so that's the 1 cost. Let's go to 2 costs. Let's clear this. Alright, so the tier list is gonna be fucked now. You know, this is the main reason why I'm not making guides, because of how broken SYNDRA is, right? SYNDRA, now, I'm gonna say a little short piece, right? I'm gonna hover over the ability. I want everybody to take a deep breath. You know, don't get too angry. Don't be like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Blah, blah. Whatever. I don't care what you think of me. I'm gonna say something that's very honest, right? And I think needs to be said. SYNDRA was nerfed 4 times before the set released. Okay? It's not like she was buffed before the set released. It wasn't like she was like, they released it like this. It's like, how did this happen? I think in PvE, everybody knew SYNDRA was broken. She was the best performing unit. Nobody knew how to optimize around SYNDRA well. Everybody was playing her with Cassiopeia. Everybody was saying it's a Cassiopeia reroll. Everybody was like prioritizing Cassiopeia items, and then SYNDRA would just do like extra damage, and people would be like, yeah, SYNDRA's broken. And it took a while until people like properly understood how to build SYNDRA and how to build the board around her. Even when the set released, after a couple days now, the set release SYNDRA board is like considered trash now, and is like almost a guaranteed bot 4 compared to like how it was optimized, right? That's just how the game works. That being said, yeah, she's fucking broken. It's ridiculous. It's kind of ruining the game right now. A lot of people are like, you know, I've had people tell me in stream, I had people tell me in comments on YouTube, I had people tell me like I've seen on Twitter, you know, like everybody's saying that they don't want to play the game because of SYNDRA, and I understand that. I've played worse balanced sets of TFT, so I'm not immune. I'm immune to it, kind of. It's like, this isn't even that bad, right? The problem is SYNDRA 2 is also busted, but anyways, let's talk why SYNDRA is busted, right? SYNDRA is the only unit in the game that can shred units. So she does a bunch of damage, right? That's a given, right? You 3-star her, she does a bunch of damage, right? She doesn't do more damage like per unit than like a Viger or a Hui. But those units are clearly worse than her, because what she does is she scales into late game. She scales and she gets these extra rifts every 30 casts that makes her do more damage to other enemies. And then she also shreds after 15 casts, which isn't that long. She shreds adjacent enemies and hits adjacent enemies. So she does like AoE damage, right? Scales into late game, so she keeps doing additional damage. So every time, like, you know, you think like every like stage somebody levels up, so they get an extra unit. Well, guess what? SYNDRA hits an extra unit, so it makes it irrelevant. She still deletes most of the board early enough, and then can focus fire on the main tanks as well as the backline units. And she does a bunch of damage. So she does everything. That's why she's broken, right? She does an insane amount of damage. She shreds. She's the only unit in the game that shreds, by the way. So even as a utility unit, she's good to have on your board no matter what. That's why people were playing her in the first place. It's why she's good with Karma. It's why she's good with every board. It's like, you don't have to worry about making a Spark or a Shiv until a lot later in the game. You can prioritize the other items and fix your item economy because of it. She also scales into late game. It's ridiculous, right? Now, you can't have somebody that does all 3. And then she also does AoE, by the way. So you can't have somebody that does everything, right? A similar unit like this was Elune last set. Elune was very similar in her construction. She hit multiple units, she gave the back row a bunch of attack speed, and she shredded. And in PvE, she was broken, and then when the set released, they giga nerfed Elune, and Elune wasn't playable until like halfway through the set. Like, nobody ever played around Elune reroll until like halfway through set 11 when they actually buffed her, right? That's what happened last set. And I think they didn't want to repeat the same thing as last set with SYNDRA, so the nerfs that they did leading up to the set release were like a lot smaller. But that's like the backstory of it if you weren't following along with it. So yes, you can bitch about it, but like, you know, don't be like, you know, super, like, you know, there's two sides of it. Like, you know, don't be like, the devs are doing a great job. Like, they are, right? I'm not trying to diss their jobs, but like, you know, don't be like, you know, sucking off the devs that they did the greatest job ever and it's the best set and this is the best balance we'll ever see. And at the same time, don't look at the don't go on the other side tangent being like they're dumb and they don't know what they're doing and this is the worst mistake ever, because they did try, right? And I think nobody was really expecting it to be this bad. People were kind of expecting her to be like dominant, but not like 4 people contesting in a lobby, whatever. Anyways, there've been worse balanced TFT, so who cares? Everything's gonna be relative to SYNDRA, so now we're just gonna take SYNDRA off the board and we're just gonna rank the rest of them as normally. Okay, that's basically how it's gonna be. Ari's like solid B tier unit. I think in terms of her set, in terms of her abilities and stuff like that, Arcana is really strong, but she's usually the last Arcana that you play. She's really strong in like Zoe reroll, because then she can give a bunch of AP. Ari kind of felt like the reroll you just plug her into a reroll comp and you give them a bunch of AP. The problem is, there's never enough room to put in the Ari as well as the other Arcana to make it worth it, to give that extra AP. So originally, like, you know, I was thinking like every reroll comp was going to use Ari to just give a shit ton of AP, and she was just going to be like the reroll bot. Like if you're playing reroll, you find an Ari, you put on an Ari, and it spikes your board by a lot. It's not actually true. So she doesn't get that much play. I feel like she's the first Arcana unit that you drop in most boards. Like you usually want to play Tahm Kench, Hecarim, and Xerath. Right? They're all like more substantial units than her. And she can also miss, so Ari reroll kind of sucks. But because she has some use in Arcana, I don't want to put her as C tier, so I'm just gonna put her as B tier. Because, like, you know, especially in mid game, she can be really strong. Like, you know, if you find an Ari and a Hecarim and you can build a board around it a little bit flexibly, she kind of accomplishes like a 2-cost, right? She's not like a reroll heavy 2-cost. You can reroll her, it's not that good, but she's not the worst, right? Akali I think is a little bit better than Syndra. Multi-striker does really well. She's not S tier Akali. Akali is really item specific. I think if you itemize Akali really well, she can scale really hard into late game with Pyro, help out your whole board. I think warriors are a bit weak in general, but her being a warrior gives her a little bit of Omnivamp, so it allows you to make things like Hodge, IE, Edge of Night. Like you can make some more like damage focused instead of like making a Bloodthirster on her. But usually that's not a build you go. Usually you're just playing her with multi-striker. And multi-striker reroll is really strong, right? She's kind of carried by Kassadin, which Kassadin is pretty much S tier. Kassadin is like, you know, does so much damage. Also really good item flexibility. I find with Kassadin, you can build quite a few items on him and still have him do the job. And that makes him really, really flexible. I love multi-striker reroll. I think multi-striker reroll is like slightly overtuned. It's a little bit strong, but it's very easy to lose with multi-striker reroll. Because the problem is it loses to like every Exodia board, right? Every time somebody hits something like Giga, if they hit like a Giga Augment and you don't hit a Giga Augment, your Kassadin just fucking dies, right? Like if somebody gets like, you know, Combat Prismatic and you don't get a Combat Prismatic, this isn't a comp that's broken that you still make a top 4 all the time. I think that it's falling off a little bit. It's still really strong, don't get me wrong, but it's falling off a lot more compared to like Syndra, for example, because before people were comparing Kassadin to Syndra. And it's like, no. Like, Syndra, you can play a Syndra 2. A Syndra 2 is as good as, like, a 4-cost, right? A Kassadin 2 doesn't do dick all. Like, you need to be, like, uncontested multi-striker and you hit Kassadin 3, right? It's very different. Cassiopeia I'll put in B tier. I always hated Cassiopeia. I thought Cassiopeia was so cool. I love the way she looked in the outfits. Like, I love the witchcraft ones because they look like they got mad style. If you don't know, I started out as an art streamer, so I always like it when like there's a little bit of like artistic direction with some of the like the designs and stuff like that. I know these are like skins in League and whatever, so I was like, you know, whenever I look at something, I'm like, damn, that's a cool outfit, or that's a cool like color scheme, or like I found that with witchcraft a lot. Like even Nico I thought looked kind of cool, and some of the Elder Students I thought looked cool as well. Right, so I wanted to like try out Cassiopeia just for that reason. I tried out a lot in PB. I played her like every single game I could find a Cassiopeia because I wanted to believe that she'd be good. She really doesn't work that well. I think that Cassiopeia, because by nature of witchcraft, you want to play with a shapeshifter frontline, and the shapeshifter frontline isn't as good as like a Vanguard frontline, for example. So it's really hard to make her scale off Guinsoo's really hard. You kind of have to build like Guinsoo's and damage, but then she's also an auto attacker. Where she gains damage based on her auto attacks, or she does more damage on her auto attack. So it's like she's in this weird spot right now, and she's kind of carried by Syndra. You know, Syndra's walking around like, oh, my aching back, carrying this Cassiopeia in every fucking fight, right? Because that's the only reason you would play Cassiopeia. Sometimes you play her with Karma, but then Karma's the main carry, and she falls off really hard because I feel like late game she can't get the stacks fast enough, and that's why she's like B tier. She's like in the same spot as like, you know, you usually just play her for synergies, and if you get like a bunch of Guinsoo's, maybe you play her, but not really. Galio's like A tier. Galio's Vanguard. I don't think he tanks that well. There's the Galio Hero Augment, which is really strong. But he's Vanguard and Mage. He's very essential on a lot of comps because of that. It's very easy to fit him in with a Nami. And Nami's like one of the best units in the game by far. So, you usually want to play him. Vanguard is also like the best frontline trait. So Galio's, like, you know, when you're upgrading from your 1-cost, usually you're playing Galio with Rumble. Rumble's in A tier for the same reason. Just Vanguards are busted. So you usually play them all together in a row. It's like Galio Rumble, Tom Kench, and Mordekaiser. So by nature of just having good traits, those two just get the bump up to A tier because you're usually going to play them. Kog'Maw's S tier. I think Kog'Maw is much more reliable than Kassadin. I think there's a lot of options. Like Kassadin, you kind of run into the problem where, like, this is what I was talking about Kassadin. Like, Kassadin, like, highs are really high, but lows are really low. Kog'Maw's way more consistent. There's a lot of really strong placing comps where you play 4 Hunter, 4 Vanguard when I was looking at the stats. And I tried it out in my games, and it does feel very strong. Kog'Maw reroll, you don't need to reroll super hard, because if you just natural a Kog'Maw, you have the option to level and just play 4 Hunter, and the Kog'Maw just, like, absolutely clean wipes, and you play 4 Vanguard because it's just broken, right? So you just get in, like, Vanguards and Hunters, and there's a lot of options. And there's also, like, the strict reroll Kog'Maw board, which you probably already seen that has, like, perfect synergy. You play Tristana as well. It's very good. So I definitely would consider, like, you know, probably one of the best units to play around. I don't know. I think Kog'Maw's a little bit overtuned, but I wouldn't want to see Kog'Maw nerfed that hard. I feel like Kog'Maw and Kassadin, they just need to be slightly nerfed, not like axed. If they're slightly nerfed, I feel like that's the power level that a 2-cost should be, because Kog'Maw falls off a lot of times late game, especially if you don't natural it for free, and that's how a 2-cost should be. It should be like, I'm playing for the range of 2nd to 4th, and I get a 1st if everything goes right. Right now, everything's being gatekept by SYNDRA, so it's hard to gauge their power levels, because it's like, yeah, Kog'Maw gets like a 2nd to 4th, but like a lot of times when Kog'Maw goes 2nd or goes 3rd, it's because there's a SYNDRA player in the lobby, right? So that's like the main thought process. Nyla's like B tier as well. Actually, Nyla I think is A tier. I'd put Nyla in A tier. Nyla does so much in terms of tanking. Sorry, my music stopped. Let's go back. Nyla does a lot. Eldritch is really strong. I feel like she does really good as a frontline unit. She's also really good at jumping around and distracting. I feel like she stalls out the fight really hard. I'm a big Nyla believer just as like an extra unit. And when you build her with items, I feel like if you ever play Warriors, Nyla does way more than Akali. If you ever play Warriors and you itemize Nyla and you itemize Akali, look at the damage reports. You'll see that Nyla does more damage a lot of the time. Unless you're like full supporting Akali and you're playing like vertical like Pyro, a lot of times Nyla 3 is just like so insanely strong. And she spends so much time dodging around that she really like wastes so much time and space that it's like, yeah, she's kind of busted. So I'd put her in A tier for sure, the same as these ones. Nunu, I'd put also in A tier. Nunu's like strong, often you play her, often you play him, them. I don't know which one's which, by the way. Isn't it like Nunu and Willump? Isn't Willump the one that's attacking, or is Nunu the giant thing at the bottom? Let me know in the comments. I need to know the lore about Nunu. But Nunu is strong as shit. Nunu Hero Augment is like the most broken augment one of the most broken augments in the game. It scales into late with the hero. If there was no hero augment, maybe Nunu's closer to B tier, because a lot of times you're just playing Nunu for the synergies and the Bastion. But Nunu is like probably one of the best Bastion units just because it just helps out the board by the most. Shyvana is like B tier. Shyvana is really often just played as a synergy bot. I think B tier is like accomplishes the job but not very well, right? I feel like Shyvana sometimes is really broken, but a lot of times you're like building your whole board to support the Shyvana with like vertical shapeshifter, full items. But it's just an inferior version. Like shapeshifter is just worse than Vanguard in most cases. I feel like Shyvana 2 does nothing. Shyvana 1 sure as hell does nothing. So you really want like Shyvana 3 when you're playing Shyvana, but then it's like, yeah, okay, Shyvana 3 is good, but I feel like 2-cost Shyvana sucks. Dragon is really good, so you have good synergies with like Varus boards, but those boards just suck ass. They're just so bad nowadays. Even relative to other 4-cost boards, they're not that good. So I think that Shyvana just like, you know, besides being contested Syndra and not being able to play Vanguards, I feel like you don't often like yearn for Shyvana on your board. At least that's just me. Tristana, I think Tristana is like a perfect 2-cost. I think Tristana reroll is like the perfect amount of strength when you play a Tristana in terms of damage. I feel like Tristana, really early item holder is really great. She holds Gwynsu perfectly. You can make Gwynsu Last Whisper playing around Callista later, and use Fairy Crown early. Fairy Crown really easy to get on there because you just hold on to a Lilia, you play a little bit of a Bastion. Really great mid-game unit. I think if you play around Tristana, a lot of times you can probably win mid game. And then she also does this thing that if somebody tries to attack her, she'll knock them back and stun them. So every time she gets dived by some kind of melee unit, she has really good self-preservation, which allows her to continue to do damage. I think Tristana reroll, as soon as like Syndra's nerfed, Tristana might pop up as being like a really broken unit because, like I said, a lot of things are gate kept by Tristana. And then Zilean also A tier. I think the 2 costs in general are very close in skill and in strength, and a lot of them are very good. It's why things like what's it called, the caretakers ally is so strong as an augment. I feel like you're happy 3-starring any 2 cost, and that's why part of the meta is a little bit like everybody's rerolling. Because even Zilean, I think Zillian's really good as a utility unit. His stun is fucking insane, and it can sway the fight by a lot. And he's Chrono and he's Preserver, so you're almost always playing him because he has like giga synergies for late game. So Zilean is less of like a play around Zilean carry with Frost, and he's more like, hey, I want a Zilean because late game I'm gonna need him for the synergies, and the stun also has value, so it'll always have value on your board. And then obviously Syndra's like somewhere like fucking, you know, let's scroll all the way up here, right? Syndra's like up here somewhere, right? This is where Syndra is. But yeah. Okay, 3 costs. Obviously, by the way, if you're still watching the video, I know the video is going to be really long. I'm sorry about that. It's just because like they added a lot of there's a lot of 1 and 2 cost units. It's going to wind down because I'll have less to say about the shittier units, and like, you know, eventually like we'll get through everything. The video is going to be a bit long. Maybe watch it at 2x speed. I don't really care. You know, it's fine. 3 cost units. Bard. Bard's like Bard's a B tier. I think Bard synergies are kind of weird, whack. Sugarcraft kind of sucks. It makes me really sad. When the set released, I really wanted Sugarcraft to be good, and I was gonna force Sugarcraft every single game. That was my strategy walking into the set, because I'm really good at scaling augments. I'm really good at playing around like cash outs and those things, because like back in set 10, 8-bit was my favorite. In set 11, Dryad was one of my favorites. I love things like augments that scale and playing around that, because there's really good high roll where you get +1, and then you're rewarded that when you get a copy of your 4 cost unit later, even if you lost a bunch of rounds, or if you didn't like preserve, like, you know, your 4 cost units, you're buffing your 4 cost unit, right? Or you're buffing your late game units, which is just generally really nice to have. At least to me, I feel a lot more comfortable playing around it, and it makes making flex boards really nice. Sugarcraft kind of sucks though. He's just B tier because he's Preserver. You usually always play a Bard. You stack vertical Preserver on a lot of boards. Preserver is one of the best traits in the game. It's just like, you know, it's hard to fit in with certain boards and certain comps, but Preserver just helps your whole team heal as well as cast, so it's just nice to have always. Ezreal C tier. Ezreal sucks. I feel like even with Ezreal 3, I feel like I go 5th. Doesn't do enough damage. The damage reduction sucks. Sometimes he griefs and he just jumps in the back line. Ezreal might even be D tier. I just don't want to be too harsh because obviously, like, you know, we're trying to be nice here. I feel like I can never rely on Ezreal, and when I'm clicking Ezreal and I know that I can't, like, he's good if I'm playing like Vertical Blaster and I have like, you know, what's his name, Varus with Smolder already, and it's like, okay, yeah, I have like Shred, or sorry, I have Sundering, so I'm just gonna play Ezreal because he synergizes with the Sundering. He really lets me down all the time. The same with Hui. Hui is good until Hui isn't good. Hui pumps out damage, right? If you read Hui's description and you read like all the damage that he does and all of that stuff, it's like he does a shit ton of damage, right? If you play Hui, he'll just like delete units, like he'll blink and like their whole board will be gone. It's just too fucking slow. It takes forever. Every 3rd cast paid 2 extra bolts, changes to every 2nd cast, and this unit's gonna be more broken than Syndra. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, bro, like, just a little bit faster. Like, maybe the mana a little bit less. Like, you need something. Like, Hui 3, I've been let down so many times. And it's really hard to play because he's like the only AP blaster. It makes sense to play Hui if you're like playing Vertical Blaster, such that like you put all your AP items on Hui, and then you can put your AD items on Ezreal or Varus. Like, it makes your board really like easy to not miss on items, if that makes sense. But at the same time, he lets me down every time. Hecarim's A tier. Hecarim's like played all the time. Bastion, a lot of times you don't play vertical Bastion, but it's really good to fit in 2 Bastion. As soon as you have the Bastion trait active, it gives everybody 10 armor. So that's really useful for your board, especially late game. And he's Arcana, as well as multi-striker. So you see him all the time on multi-striker boards as a frontline unit. And then Arcana, you see him all the time just to synergize for late game unit. You put in 2 Bastion, boom, your whole team gets armor. You put in Arcana, boom, your whole team gets durability and attack damage or other Arcana traits. Really good unit. Really good synergy. Mostly a synergy bot, but really good units. Jinx is like somewhere here or here. I think Jinx is the same spot as Bard. Actually, maybe Jinx is a little bit higher. Maybe Hecarim's S. I'm more happy like this. Hecarim S tier, Jinx A tier. Jinx is really good with the Hunter Kog'Maw board. I think Jinx can pump out damage. Maybe Jinx isn't that good. I don't know. Jinx is good specifically with Kog'Maw, and that's why she's A tier. End of story. Right? If you take out Kog'Maw and you just play her with Sugarcraft, she's kind of ass. But strictly because she is so important in the Kog'Maw board to synergize with that Kog'Maw really nicely. She's the best hunter usually to play with the Kog'Maw, besides like Olaf in some cases, so you know you just have to play her. Katarina I think is the same spot as like Jinx. I think Katarina's like really balanced in the way that she does like a good amount of damage. She is really strong. She's really hard to play around because her synergies suck though. So she's like C tier, right? That's literally it. Her synergies suck. The boards that you would play her with, like fairy boards and warrior boards, are both ass right now, just like by nature of like the way the meta is currently. I feel like warriors, I always felt like melees would have a hard time, but multi-strikers don't have a hard time, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But like I feel like Katarina, she dives back when she dies. You give her like a bunch of items, she does a lot of damage, but then she just falls off late game because you can't invest so much gold into her without her being like a solid carry. So a lot of times you just wouldn't want to play her and you want to play other warriors. I feel more comfortable itemizing a Nyla than a Katarina, but Katarina gets access to the fairy crown, so it's really good. But like then you have to play fairies, and it's like, yeah, you can play like fairy preserver warrior and it's pretty strong, and you can play 4 warrior with a bunch of preservers and the Rakan. But like, let's be honest here, if you're doing that, why not just take the Katarina items, which are usually going to be AP items, just put them on a fucking Karma, right? I think that's what people have done, and then it's like, oh yeah, that's a lot better. And it's like, that's why she doesn't play that much, right? Mordekaiser S tier. Mordekaiser's probably better than Hecarim as a tank. Hecarim's a synergy bot. Mordekaiser's just strong as shit. This is part of the reason why Syndra's busted, right? Mordekaiser's so fucking busted. Mordekaiser, he does like so much damage. I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, I like Mordekaiser, by the way. I think Mordekaiser's like the coolest unit in League of Legends because, like, you know, I don't play League. I say this all the time, but like, if I did, I'd be a Mordekaiser main. He is so cool. He just like pumps his chest. Welcome to my realm. Kind of like Dormammu. Did everybody play Marvel vs. Capcom, by the way? It's a completely separate tangent. If you played Marvel vs. Capcom, I used to play Dormammu in that. Holy shit. That's what I think about when I see Dormammu. I think about Dormammu where he like puts you in like the shadow realm and he pops you like a pimple and then you're just fucking dead. And it's like air combo, procreate, boom, fire, thorns. Well, that's infinite, but like, you know, we don't talk about infinite. Anyways, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, just know that Mordekaiser is cool. He's broken in this game though. In this set of TFT, he's arguably one of the best tanks in the game. I think Mordekaiser 3 is one of the most unkillable units in the game. The only one that's more unkillable is probably Vex in certain situations than Wukong. They're all kind of like in this S tier of like giga tank units. I'll just talk about them all at the same time. I think Mordekaiser is the best one out of all of them, and that's namely because like Eldritch, you just get him for free. Play with the Syndra. And then like he gains AP while he's fighting in the combat. So like if you make him a giga tank and he lives forever, he just keeps getting a larger and larger shield because it scales off his AP, and then he just keeps getting AP, and then he does a shit ton of damage. Like a Mordekaiser 3 doing 430 AP damage in a 2 hex line without any items. You put like Crown Guard on this guy, and he's Vanguard, so he's like impossible to kill because Vanguard is also kind of overtuned. It's kind of nuts. So Mordekaiser is just up there. Nico is like A tier. I think Nico used to be the unit that was hardest to kill ever. She's like like some of the shapeshifters just don't ever die. Like Nico and Elise are like 2 of the units that's like they just fucking don't die ever. So I think like she gets A tier by nature of that, but the problem is it's like they fall off really hard late game. I think with like scaling and damage, they just don't last that long. Then you have to play like 6 shapeshifter, then your board's kind of shit. And then if you try and play preserver with shapeshifter, it's pretty good. But the problem is if you're playing preservers, there's better ways to optimize the board, so that's why it's like not that great. But she's still A tier. Shen is like B tier, I think. Like besides being the synergies, I feel like Shen doesn't tank as hard as he could. Maybe that's just me. Shen is like the same tier as Hecarim. Maybe Shen's A tier. I'll put Shen in A. I'll put Swain in B. I think Shen I like a little bit more than Swain. I think Swain is really good if you're playing Nico, but I think if you itemize Swain and you don't itemize Nico, you're kind of fucked. Like you don't win the fight. And then Viger's in A tier. Viger scales with charms. Viger does an insane amount of damage, right? If you scale up the Viger, he'll literally deal like, I don't know, like what he'll literally deal like, well, he'll do like one-shot units. Like he'll do like 1,000+ damage in like one hit. And with Mage, when he double casts, it's like insane. So Viger's definitely up there in A tier. It's just like, you know, kind of gatekept by some of the other units. Okay, so those are the 3 costs. Let's go on to 4 costs. Fiora is A tier. Gwen is B tier. Maybe C tier. Callista is B tier. Karma is S tier. Nami is S tier. Nasus is A tier. Olaf is C tier. Rakan is A tier. Ryze is B tier. Tahm Kench is S tier. Taric is here. Varus is here. Alright, let's talk about it now. I'll talk about by units. I need to like see it out because like I have to talk about them relatively. We'll start at the bottom why Gwen's bad. Gwen, Sugarcraft, you're rarely playing towards it. I think she's a little bit underpowered. I feel like you play her in certain lines, but she's usually the one you want to itemize last, right? If you're playing her with Preserver's Karma, she's really busted. But that's because Karma's kind of busted and Preservers are kind of busted. And the Gwen like pops off, but like you never want to itemize the Gwen first, and she'll kind of let you down a little bit because you want to put the items on Karma. I'm willing to put Gwen in B tier, but I think Gwen just like, you know, there's better versions of the board that you can play, and I think the Gwen is the most bait, and that's why maybe Olaf is worse than that. It's probably something like this. Obviously it looks like they're very separated. I would say the difference between S and D is a lot closer here, or the difference between A and D is a lot closer. Olaf fucking sucks. Now, the reason Olaf sucks, I'll tell you why Olaf sucks. Olaf sucks because he is a hunter. And hunter, I believe, needs a takedown, right? Like, if we go to here, like, how do I read the hunter traits? It's probably way at the bottom. Well, yeah, Sugarcraft is going to place poorly. Where's Hunter? I want to get set 12 info here. Traits. Hunter. Hunters gain attack damage increase the first time they get a takedown in combat. This is what makes people think Olaf maybe can do something. It's because of this. This is literally the reason that Olaf sometimes looks like he's doing a lot of work. Because a lot of times you have Olaf in with 2 Hunter and you're playing like Frost or some dumb shit. And this is what happens with Olaf. If you're playing against an unupgraded board, like a board where they didn't hit all their rerolls, they're all shit, everything is bad, whatever, then Olaf will kill a unit, he gets the giga attack speed, and then he starts jumping around. Sorry, he gets the attack damage, and then he starts jumping around and killing everything. Read Olaf's description. That's what he does, right? Every 4 attacks, and when charging at targets, he leaps and he does damage. And then he gains attack speed, and he's immune to thing, and he gains Omnivamp, and it just goes absolutely nuts. You build him like a pure damage monster, and you look at the Olaf, and you're like, wait, Olaf isn't bad. He's killing everything. And then guess what? What happens later? What happens in a turn? What happens in 2 turns? In 2 turns, you lose every single fucking fight because the Olaf can't kill anything. And he just jumps at one of the units. He stands there like a dumbass and he just dies. Because a lot of Olaf's damage, a lot of times when you're playing Hunter, is based on like him getting a kill. And if you're playing Kog'Maw, sometimes you'll play Kog'Maw and you'll play Olaf. And yes, it's really max cap because you have the Kog'Maw. But if you have like a Kog'Maw 1 or a Kog'Maw 2 and you try and level to the Olaf, a lot of times the Kog'Maw kill steals, right? If anybody on the board kill steals the Olaf doesn't get the Hunter bonus, or at least that's the way I understand it. I'm trying to make rational reasons of it. I played Olaf in like 3 or 4 games, and this is what happened every single time. And then every single time, this guy doesn't do anything, and then he's just fucking shit, right? And then that's the problem, right? And if you play him with Vertical Frost, it's the same difference, same problem. So much of it is dependent on him getting a kill. And a lot of times you're playing other units with the Olaf's not getting the kill, and then he doesn't get like the giga damage spike, and it's just bad. So it's just by nature of trait. Gwen kind of sucks. You never play with Sugarcraft. Sugarcraft in general is just bad right now. It's really hard to play. Even if you scale it all the way, you usually just end up at most a 5th. Gwen does a lot of damage. I have faith in Gwen being good, but she just can't manage it on her own. So she's C tier. And there's better boards to play, and you'll itemize other units before you itemize Gwen. Kallista's really strong. Kallista's like what I think a 4-cost should kind of be like. I think Kallista in certain situations is very strong. Kallista with preservers as well as like good items is really strong. A lot of times you just play her as a synergy bot for multi-striker. I feel like in the multi-striker board she doesn't do as much, but you can still, like, if you can itemize her as an extra carry, she's really good. She pumps out damage, but in general she fits in like these really cool boards really easily. She could fit in these level 9 boards really easily. Multi-striker with Fairy are really nice because you can fit in the multi-strikers with the Camille, and Camille's really strong. I think she's just solid. Rise is kind of weird. Rise is really solid. The boards that you have to play with him are really weird, and you need like an enabler. Like a lot of times you need like a portal +1. I think that Rise can pump out damage. He's really specific with items, and I think that's the problem. Varus is like a little bit better than like Gwen, but Varus is kind of fake. I think Varus you can fit into a board really nicely, but you need to find a Smolder. So much of Varus is locked behind getting Pyro online with Smolder for the synergy for anti-heal and all of that stuff. Varus items are being really whacked, and I think that Varus doesn't kill that well. The only reason Varus isn't C tier is because Pyro +1 gives him an execute, and then he basically deletes everybody, right? If you get 5 Pyro Varus, that's enough to make him from C tier to B tier. Because if you have 6 Sugarcraft Gwen, she's still not doing anything. But 5 Pyro Varus is good enough because every melee unit will lose to the Varus. Fiora's insane. She has a lot of like win cons. She takes Ornn artifacts really well, so you can take like Capricious Forge and itemize her. She's on a lot of very greedy boards, so she'll obviously place really high. But she's like one of the best users for Witchcraft and Warrior. She leaps the backline, and then she does so much damage. So because she can go to the backline really easily, a lot of times she can just snipe your opponent. I've seen Fiora boards just cheese a win against even a SYNDRA board, right? Because if the Fiora has like an Edge of Night and really strong attack like Edge of Night Deathblade or something like that, she dives the backline, she does a bunch of damage. If the SYNDRA doesn't have some buddies next to her already, she just does a shit ton of damage to all the enemies there. There's so many times where you can RNG just win a fight, and that makes her really broken. Nasa is one of the best tanks in the game. Nasa's damage scales off his HP, which actually works out really well because not only can he tank a lot and take a bunch of health off of enemies, he also has the option to like deal a bunch of physical damage. This is what makes like shapeshifters kind of awkward though, is that shapeshifters, usually all the other ones are shit, and you're basically just hoping that you hit a Nasus 2. Right, Nasus 2 is going to out-tank pretty much everybody except maybe like a Witchcraft 4 Nico 3-star. Nasus is a really strong unit. A lot of times you can just play Nasus without even the shapeshifter synergy. Just play him raw with some preservers, and he's just a really good tank. Rakan's Preserver and Fairy, really good to fit in. There's some Fairy's just a 2-trade and it gives you a free item, so that's like the only benefit of Fairy. You can often play Rakan and then like a Milio late game, Rakan and Kallista. And hitting Preserver, he's like the best Preserver because he's a frontline Preserver unit next to Morgana, so it's just great. Taric, Giga Tank. Giga Tank. Build a lot of AP, does a bunch of damage as well. Absolutely insane. So, you know, Taric's the GOAT. I think Taric's the only reason Bastions are ever played, because basically just play Taric and Hecarim. Those are your 2 Bastions. If you play anybody else, in a lot of cases, you're just like going 8th. But Taric is one of the best tanks in the game. Very, very strong. Now we get to the broken units. We'll start with Tahm Kench. Arcana, really strong. Vanguard, best tank augment in the game. or train in the game, does a stun. Does a stun as well. Tahm Kench kind of does everything. He's not the greatest tank in the world, but does everything. There's almost never a point where you're like, nah, I won't play Tahm Kench. You usually always play him. Supported also by the Vanguard trait being strong, so definitely big Giga strong. Nami's crazy. Nami does so much damage. Nami's mage, so if you get mage in, she loses a little bit of AP, but then she double casts, so it makes up for it. Nami does an insane amount of damage. She does the most egregious stun I've seen in a TFT game in like 4 sets, I swear. Her stun covers the whole fucking board. Like, it's so insane. Like, the whole board is like, okay, let's just take a second here. It's nuts. And then she also does a shit ton of damage. If you ever itemize Nami as a carry, I thought Nami was just going to be like Morgana, like utility bot, like set 11. She's not. She's really strong. And then Karma. Karma's just really busted, right? Karma is busted for multiple reasons. One, she shares a trait in Canter with SYNDRA. So you can easily just scale up a SYNDRA 2 as a secondary carry and then play Karma. I don't know how strong Karma is going to be once they get rid of SYNDRA, but with the boards that SYNDRA is unaffected by, Karma is still really strong. She still does a shit ton of damage. She does like this damage over time and shoots 2 units. If you build her with good items and anti-heal, basically she prevents like most of the board from healing, as well as like literally hits the backline really easily. So if you place your Karma on the same side as the enemy carry, a lot of times the bullets will kill off the enemy carry earlier. And you just want to play like a stall comp because of that. That's why Karma Preservers, I usually play Karma Preservers. You usually have a dual carry and you're just stacking Preservers because you're trying to stall out as long as possible. And if you manage to stall long enough, the Karma will win the fight every time. And that's what's really in craze. Really crazy. The other thing is that if she kills units, they also deal damage to adjacent units as well. It's not that much, but it helps the damage, so it really snowballs, right? Even if she doesn't snipe the backline carry, she might snipe one of the units next to the carry. So you really have to position around the Karma, right? If you're fighting a Karma, it's like you want to like put your carry on the opposite side of the Karma and also have nobody adjacent to the Karma, so that like you delay like getting extra hits. So there's a lot more to be optimized to play around it. It's just really hard because of the way that the current set is balanced, right? Finally, we get to 5 costs, right? This tier is taking forever, by the way, but hopefully it was enjoyable. 5 costs, we'll do them just like off rip. Briar, in terms of 5 costs, I feel like she's B tier. I don't know. Briar is really item specific. I feel like when you put good items on Briar, like you need like a Deathblade. Deathblade, like what? What do you want on Briar? You want Deathblade, Giant Slayer, and Edge of Night. Like, I think if you put those items on Briar, she's S tier. If you don't have those items on Briar and you have like 2 of them, she's A tier. And if you have only 1 of them, she's B tier. And if you have none of them, she's C tier. Like, literally. Like, she does so much damage and she dives the backline and she goes like, she fucking goes insane. She's nuts. She does so much. The main thing that you might have to understand is that you don't want to build Omnivamp on her. Because she does like a stun and she does a bunch of physical damage. But she also, on her cast, gains like a huge amount of Omnivamp anyways. So a lot of times Bloodthirster and Hodge are like really bad on her, which is counterintuitive. But then also tank items are often really bad on her. It's just kind of weird, right? But she has like an AP and an AD ratio. That's why you want probably like Giant Slayer. I'm sure even like Adaptive Helm is good on her or something. It's just hard to get her to work. By nature of her being Eldritch, she's like alright. If she wasn't Shapeshifter, she was Vanguard, she'd be like triple S tier. But because she's Shapeshifter as well, it's hard to like fit in the synergies. A lot of times when you're playing Shapeshifter, you already have your synergies with like, you know, if you're playing 4 Shapeshifter, you're usually not getting to 6 Shapeshifter. If you're playing 6 Shapeshifter, you probably already lost the game. If you're playing 8 Shapeshifter, you gotta hope that you get a Talisman of Ascension or else you probably lost the game as well. But you know, I digress. She's somewhere there. Camille's a little bit better. I think Camille's A tier. Camille does the same thing like Briar. There's a lot of units that just like, a lot of 5 costs just like dive and do a bunch of stun and do a bunch of crazy shit. I think Camille is just hard to hit because she's always contested and held on to. The synergies are good with Chrono and Multi-Striker because you can fit her in nicely on a lot of boards, especially with Chrono. But she does so much damage and she can really carry a board. But Camille 1 is trash. You need a Camille 2. And that's the thing. So she's only A tier. I would maybe put her higher. Diana I think is S tier. Diana's a sleeper pick of S tier. She's Bastion Frost. I feel like you always want to play her. She does a shit ton of damage. She does chills. The chills basically reduce attack speed for enemies as well. She's one of the best Bastions you can play. You can synergize it really well as like a really high cap late game board if you just play Diana with what's his name, Hecarim, to get Arcana in. She's really strong. It's just you're never really playing towards Diana because she's a 5 cost, right? The 5 cost you have to look at it a bubble. You're very rarely gonna hit these 5 costs, and you're very rarely gonna be able to play these 5 costs, like have the items for them to play them. Actually, maybe I should drop her down a bit. Okay, I'll put her here because Morgana is that she's that girl, you know. Morgana you always play even if you don't have items for her because she's Preserver, so she's just way better. But Diana's like, I guess she's the same as Camille. Yeah, that makes more sense. I think Diana's more strong. I think Diana's stronger than Camille, right? In terms of what she can do for your board. But I think that she's really hard to have items for, and then sometimes she just fucking dies instantly. Smolder is like A tier as well. Milio I think is A tier. Nora I think is A tier, and I think Xerath. It's like this, yeah. Oh, it's hard to say. Do I just put Briar here for the culture as well? Briar has let me down. This is a personal vendetta. Clock it in. That's the final tier list. Okay. Milio drops items on your whole board. So Milio gets the A tier just by nature of like, you know, itemizing everybody randomly. And he can just be the extra fairy, right? Because a lot of times you're going to have like a dead fairy unit, like a Rakan. Smolder does anti-heal. Put him in A tier. Right, does a lot of damage as well. If you have a Smolder too, a lot of times you just win the game. Really good with the Blaster Pyro board. Probably the only reason you would ever play Varus is if you know that you're gonna hit a Smolder. Nora Mage. Usually with Mage, this is the one you want to hit. Yuumi does a lot. Yuumi you could put as a usually put Yuumi as a frontline unit because Yuumi does passive healing. So you should basically just frontline one of your units like a Mordekaiser with a Nora. Mordekaiser with a Yuumi attached, like holy shit, you're fucking cooking. Xerath Arcana. Xerath does an insane amount of damage. If you just happen across a Xerath 2, I'm pretty sure a Xerath 2 is like an insta win. Like you can even sell some of your like I think if you have the option of Xerath 2 or Karma 2, you just put the items on Xerath. You know what I mean? Absolutely nuts. Does insane amount of damage. Arcana buff if you're buying charms, which you will be late game. Giga buffs your whole board as well. Gives you access to like actually really good charms, so you're just like at a strict advantage in a lot of late game fights as well. I think if everybody could pick a 5 cost to play, it's always going to be Xerath. Morgana's up here because on the boards that you would play Morgana, like the Preserver boards, like Xerath is like an always take. Morgana is like sometimes take, but like 99% of the times you take, right? You know, so that's why she's there. It's because she's Preserver. Really good frontline unit. Preservers gain double the healing, so it makes her a really strong frontline unit. And then she like abducts units, so she gives you like literally extra gold every turn. If you have a Morgana too, you can farm like 10 gold a turn sometimes because she keeps abducting units, which is kind of crazy. She also deals additional damage. It's kind of nuts. Anyway, so those are the tier lists. That's everybody. So, you know, obviously it's SYNDRA and then everybody else after that. Hopefully this was enjoyable, right? I wanted to make a tier list. We're kind of doing it off the cuff. I explained every unit in my thought process, so the video is gonna be very long. Obviously you don't have to watch it if you don't want to, but this is like my honest take on everything and explaining every single unit. If there's something that you think that I missed, sure, you can let me know. But yeah, this is my thoughts after 1 week of the set. Hopefully in terms of what I want in balance changes, obviously I want SYNDRA a little bit nerfed. Like not a little bit, but like not like axed. I think she just has to be like nerfed. Like I think if you nerf her cast, she's probably fine. Now I don't want to bite my words and them do that and then she's still broken. But like in my heart of heart, I feel like that's good enough. Probably. But then like if you look at all the other units, it's like, you know, I kind of explain all the problems with them. So like, you know, to revert that, fix the other things, right? Like Sugarcraft a little bit stronger, helps out all the Sugarcraft units. All the units that like don't do what they're supposed to do, like Warwick, Olaf, Twitch, for example. Some of the tanks like Bastion, the trait just has to be buffed. Vanguard's a trait has to be a little bit dealt with, probably, like a little bit nerfed. Mordekaiser needs a little bit of a tweaking, right? Some of the like strict units like Kassadin, Kog'Maw obviously need to be like slightly reduce their damage. But yeah, that's everything. Hopefully that was enjoyable. We do one of these once, you know, might not be the best content, but we do one of these once per set. So this is going to be the tier list of the set. And then hopefully we'll see how it goes. Anyways, thank you for watching. See you later.